Westwood Studio is one of the all-time greatest PC game developers, responsible for coining the phrase real-time strategy and having a huge hand in the genre's development. Following on from their groundbreaking title Dune 2, the Command & Conquer series went on to define the template for strategy games for well over a decade. Without it, there would be no StarCraft, no Age of Empires, no Total Annihilation, and we certainly wouldn't be playing games like Dawn of War 2 and Empire Total War today. But despite the huge list of titles under the C&C banner that Westwood will always be remembered for, it's worth keeping in mind that it wasn't their only product. Over the years, Westwood put out many other games of different genres which tend to be overshadowed by their RTS opus. Some are good, some less so, but they serve to demonstrate that Westwood was far more than just a one-trick pony. So let's take a look at some of Westwood Studios' games you may not have heard of, and a good place to start is at the end, on the same planet where it all began. Arrakis. Dune. Desert planet. It was here in 1992 that Westwood created what we now know as real-time strategy. In 2001 they returned to the setting one last time with Emperor Battle for Dune, chronicling the events following the original and its remake Dune 2000. The game once again sees conflict between three great houses of the Landsraad, the Atreides, the Harkonnen, and the Ordos, struggling to control the planet of Dune and the valuable spice melange that is produced on its surface. As in the previous games, the spice provides a convenient resource for the player to gather in order to pay for the training of units and the construction of buildings. This time though, the conflict is over more than just the spice. The Emperor Corrino is dead, and the Spacing Guild has declared a war of assassins between the three houses, a limited form of warfare restricted to the planet's surface to decide which will inherit the Golden Lion throne. What this means in game terms is that the player must fight to control territories on an overarching tactical map. Whilst this might look familiar to C&C veterans, it actually has more in common with the Total War series. Each faction takes it in turns to invade a neighbouring territory in an attempt to take control of it, and must be prepared to defend against similar attacks from the enemy. It's important to make the right choice since both armies receive reinforcements every few minutes during combat depending on the number of adjacent friendly spaces. It's even possible to retreat from a territory if you feel that the cause is lost, creating a reserve force from the evacuated units that can be used for leverage in more challenging levels. On top of this, completing objectives in certain territories will earn you favour with a number of sub-factions, including the native Fremen or the Imperial Sardaukar stormtroopers. These can be persuaded to lend you their services in battle, unlocking new units with special abilities that can prove very useful. The system really helps to remove the linearity of the game and actually make you think about where you want your forces to go. On the other hand, it also means you can end up playing the same map over and over again if the computer really wants it back. Secondary objectives make things a bit more interesting, as do the quirks of fighting on Arrakis itself. Only the rocky areas are suitable for building your base, and the desert presents its own share of hazards, such as violent storms and of course the legendary sandworms. Luckily the game doesn't restrict you to the desert environment the whole time, taking you to different locations and story missions that pop up now and again, so you'll also be able to fight in the snowfields of Draconis 4 or the wastelands of Giedi Prime. Since they tend to mix up the formula by not involving base building, they're a nice change of pace and of course work hand in hand with the live action cutscenes to weave a proper story through the campaign. The videos are pretty much what you'd expect from a Westwood game, high production values but a fairly limited budget that mostly gets spent on hiring known actors. You get some excellent performances from the main cast, who include Michael Dorn, Vincent Schiavelli and Mike McShane, but on the other hand the supporting characters tend to be pretty dire. The thing that was interesting to me about these videos is that they mimic the style and visual qualities of the 1984 David Lynch film, right down to the costumes and the designs of the different faction ships. The dialogue too is written with an obvious care and reverence of the source material, even if it isn't canonical, which means if you're a fan of the books, you're in for a real treat.
It is the slow blade that penetrates the sheep.
As to the gameplay itself, well, that's where the game falls down a bit. Whilst at the time the classic formula of building a base and building an army big enough to march across the map and wipe out the enemy in one massive assault was the standard, these days we've come to expect more from our RTSs. It's still fun, but doesn't offer much in the way of tactical options. Poor unit pathfinding and imprecise band selection in the 3D environments doesn't help either, but at least the unit design is interesting, approaching Red Alert levels of bizarreness. So, is Emperor Battle for Dune worth playing today? Well, if you come looking for a complex, thoughtful RTS, then you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you're a fan of Frank Herbert's universe and the idea of catching and riding your own Shai Hulud in battle sounds appealing, then the game is a very worthy addition to the fiction, as well as being a perfect showcase of Westwood's gaming legacy. Long live the fighters!